right into it. So, I mean, the biggest news this weekend is recruiting, as always. Over the weekend, five-star D end Lamar Brown, considered the number one player by ESPN in 2026. The defensive lineman chooses LSU over Miami, Texas A&M, all those schools. I mean, uh, unsurprisingly, I'll be honest, it was pretty obvious that it was between LSU and Texas A&M. Miami did compete for the guy. I'm not going to say they didn't, but that was, I mean, it's probably honestly the minor news in terms of what maybe Miami fans could be a little bit worried about over the weekend with, about maybe the defensive backs and the safeties for the 2026 and the future classes. I think that's definitely the biggest thing that we want to talk about this weekend, right, Shay?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we'll get into it a little bit, but Miami has a fairly solid, like, deep rotation in terms of defensive linemen, but now and in the future that are constantly like coming in. But there's the defensive backs that have been kind of escaping them in this recruiting cycle a little bit as of recently. I think you kind of talked about it a little bit the other day, but sorry, I'm blanking on the name really fast. But what was his name?
Tyreek Queen and
Yeah,
Blake Stewart. Those are the two
yeah.
main guys this weekend. On Saturday, I believe Blake Stewart commits to, or no, Sunday, Blake Stewart commits to Clemson, and as well over the weekend, Tyreek Green commits to Georgia. Neither guys are from the Miami area, but these are two dudes Miami were really going after. You definitely could see that Miami was pushing for these guys. They were trying to salvage the DB range, the group over there, because if we're going to be honest here, it's lacking for the 2026 class. I know it's not necessarily something to be worried about for this season, 2025, with all the transfer that they made, and the guys that they have in that room right now is, I would say, it's pretty solid. But in terms of the future, I don't think I do think it's necessarily, it could be something of a concern. I mean, Miami, you would want them to get the guys that they need, and to over this recruiting cycle, I believe we have 3, maybe even 4 guys that they missed on. Devin Jackson to
Yeah,
Oregon,
another
Tyreek
one.
Green to Georgia, Stewart to Clemson, and then AJ Halsey, the transfer, to go into
Yeah.
LSU. I mean, that's 4 guys right there that Miami did miss on. Again, not necessarily something that we should be worried about for this season. But Shay, do you think that this could be something to worry about for the future?
Yeah, I mean, definitely something to look at towards the future. Miami's been a little bit. I mean, the secondary was really poor last year after the departures of both Cam Kinchins and James Williams, and like you lose those two kind of staples that were there for a few years, and then you don't want it to constantly be. You don't want to, like we were talking about last week with Carson Beckley. You don't want to constantly have to rely on transfers year in year out to come in and kind of save your program when you're lacking in spots. Like if you need a quick 1 year pickup, in a certain spot, like that's fine, but to constantly need to refresh your team through like the transfer portal is not the best strategy to build a consistently winning program. And that's what Miami's had to do this offseason. So a bunch of DB acquisitions over the course of the offseason. Zachariah Poyser, Charles Brantley, Xavier Lucas, who we talked about last week. I mean, we're going to get into like the full DB group as we go on through the show, but a lot of like necessary changes in that secondary after they greatly underperformed last year and struggled really badly consistently. And I mean, moving into the future, like you want to kind of try and lock down some of these prospects, even if they're not, even if they're not in your home state. Miami did a really good job during this transfer portal cycle of attacking, the DB area that they really struggled in. And a lot of these guys are on the younger end. Like Xavier Lucas is a sophomore. Xavier Lucas is a sophomore. Jacoby Thomas is a senior, which gives you more experience for the year. Charles Brantley, also another senior that's going to give you some experience. A good little mix of seniors and younger guys that are kind of going to come in and give you some experience for this year. And I think they brought in a little bit of some youth for the future, but just a combination of that. But like I said, you want to kind of lock down these guys for 4 years. You never know.
Yeah, I do think we do also have a couple of returning guys that I am very happy about, like an OJ
Yes.
Frederick. I mean, that's one guy that's a freshman that's going to be a sophomore, and that's a guy you can be really happy about that Miami does have, and even Damari Brown, who's entering his junior year. So I think that you have these guys that you can look at and you can kind of say, yeah, we missed out on some guys, but we do still have a very deep group that is still relatively young. So I wouldn't put it at the top of Miami's concerns for this season, but I am not necessarily gonna not say that it's not a worry that
Mhm.
Miami on the recruiting path over this summer hasn't been, you know, didn't get a guy that you would want them to get.
Mhm. But I will say is like I don't find it too concerning because I have a lot of faith in both DB coaches that are in the room. Both Zach Etheridge, who is brand new, and I am blanking on this. Will Harris, the other new safeties coach, coming from Florida, was at University of Washington for a few years. Like he's been a consistent recruiter, developer constantly. I had a few guys come out of Washington who played at a high level. Zach Etheridge had a phenomenal year with that Houston secondary defense. They limited opponents to 188 passing yards last year, and they allowed throughout the season the fewest that they had in a non-COVID year since the '94 season. So he can coach ball. He can coach the secondary. And he had a similar, I mean, back in when he was coaching with Auburn, similar thing. And you see that when he brings a guy like Keontae Scott, a guy who played really well under him, can play in that nickel spot. That if Miami kind of wants to play smaller sets, you're going to have to rely on like consistent nickel corner who can come in there, play. Also, another thing about Keontae Scott that I saw, really electric returner that he's been in his career. I think, I think he was top 10 in average per punt returns last year. So, another versatility, can play in that nickel spot. And I think between those two coaches, bringing in guys that they know and bringing that, just being able to develop at a high level, I think Miami they'll be able to replenish the secondary as like the years go by.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we move on, I want to say Falconer again. Thank you for the $3 and the 305. Really appreciate that.
Appreciate it.
But yeah, and you make a great point about the smaller sets. Cory Heatherman, the new DC in Minnesota, he played a lot of the I think it's called the 4-2. Is it the 4-2-5?
4-2-5, yeah.
4-2, the 4-2-5 system, which is four guys in the front, two linebackers, five DBs. So that, I mean, right away, that is a smaller set. You're having more DBs, you're having more athletes instead of big guys. This is, it's supposed to, you're supposed to be really good against, you can load the box. You can, it's more, you have a lot of different coverages that you can do. It's a really good system, but it's a good system if you have the right athletes.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them is the DBs. Have all these, a consistent amount of DBs that you can consistently rotate in or just have in that kind of formation is necessary. And that's another thing about Cory Heatherman that I do think will continue to help Miami in the future is, I mean, I think that our defense is already better. It's going to be better. And one thing that helps is what Cory Heatherman brings. We were talking about this earlier last week that Cory Heatherman's going to bring a different kind of philosophy to Miami that Lance Guidry thankfully did not. One thing that you can definitely see with him in Minnesota was his, he was very versatile with the defensive linemen. Last year in Minnesota, he had 7 defensive linemen log 125 snaps or more. His formation of the 4-2-5 is built on really stacking the box, and you kind of saw it throughout the course of last season at Minnesota in the Big Ten. They were 9th in points allowed. They only allowed 16.9 points per game. They were 12th in rushing defense, 9th in passing defense. They had 22 picks and a +9 turnover margin. These are the numbers you really want to have for the upcoming season. So I think we should be looking towards that for next season as we get closer and closer to to Notre Dame.
Yeah, and I'm counting on Notre Dame. But another big thing that like he consistently preach, I think it gets lost because you want big plays, big sacks, tackles for losses, interceptions are all important. But at the end of the day, it's like wrap up. I think one guy that they brought in that I was looking at some of the stats here, Zachariah Poyser, 13% missed tackle rate, very low. But it's even better when you consider 2 of Miami's safeties last year, both Jaden Harris and Mish Powell, both over 25. Both Mish Powell at 25%, Jaden Harris at 27% missing tackles. It's just as simple as you get guys on the ground, they can't go further, they can't get run after catch, they can't explode through a gap in the line, and then break off a big gain and constantly keep those drives going that killed Miami so often, like especially in those big games. It starts with the fundamentals, and I think not Lance Guidry, so thankfully not. I think Cory Heatherman is gonna kind of preach those fundamentals, and even with those smaller sets, give those DBs the power to kind of make plays and get their hands on the football and make an impact in a variety of ways.